We begin this news hour here in Nigeria, where police in the northwest region say they've rescued nearly 200 villagers who were kidnapped from their homes by criminal gangs. The victims, many of them young, had spent several weeks in captivity. They appeared exhausted after their ordeal. A police spokesman in Zamfara state said the 187 villagers were freed during an operation in Tsibiri forest. Some are said to have died. Last month, the authorities in Zamfara and neighbouring Kaduna state shut down phone communications to enable the security forces fight armed gangs known locally as bandits. They've been responsible for a wave of violence that's included killings and abductions. Some of those targeted have been school children.
187 victims were rescued as a result of the pressure mounted on the bandits by the state government and other security agencies, whereby we stormed Tsibiri forest, where kidnapped victims were kept for various days, some ranging to 52 days, 48 days, 54 days, and 4 months. They have now been rescued unconditionally.
The police commissioner, I'm assuring you that these rescued victims will be treated well, as we have already kept in stock all the medications required to take care of them. We will accommodate them accordingly and comfortably, and we'll make sure that we make all efforts to reunite these victims with their respective families.
Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined now on the line by the Defense and Security Analyst, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, who is also CEO of the West African security firm Beacon Consulting. Dr. Adamu, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What more can you tell us about the circumstances in which these people were found? I understand that a number of them died.
Hi, Charles. Good evening. Unfortunately, due to the current circumstances in Zamfara state, it's very difficult, first off, to obtain independent verification of these claims. And then even where you are able to reach, the sources that would confirm developments, the circumstances make it very difficult for these sources to speak out to you. And so we've found it difficult, really, apart from listening to what the police is claiming, to get any independent verification of this development. Yes, the fact is people have been displaced, but part of what we would have loved to know is when were these people abducted, who abducted them. There is a narrative out there that are saying this may be family members of the bandits, perhaps, or communities where these bandits are operational, and so not necessarily, victims of abduction. Unfortunately, like I said, there is no independent way of verifying what the true circumstances are.
Well, I mean, let's work on the assumption that what the police are saying is reasonably accurate, that these people were in fact kidnapped victims. The police in their statement said they were rescued unconditionally. Does that suggest that a ransom was not paid based on the analysis that you do of these kinds of statements?
So that's the narrative that the police is selling, and again, it's very difficult to believe that narrative. In the past, we know that these bandits, when they are faced with such circumstances, where the police or other security agencies are, clamping down on them, then they do one of two things, unfortunately, either to kill their victims, or in certain instances, the victims escape. But very rarely do you hear instances where the victims are rescued, which is what the police is selling now. And so it's neither here nor there. When the extraordinary measures were implemented in Zamfara state, this was the major concern that we had, the blackout on news and the possibility of these types of developments occurring with no independent verification. I know that there has been an attempt in the last few days by the Zamfara state government to lift the measure, especially in Gusau, Zamfara state capital, and that has allowed news to be trickling in, but that's really not good enough, unfortunately.
And in terms of the condition of the victims, we were looking at their video there. They were looking very unwell, weren't they? And some of them were carrying babies and apparently had been in the forest for weeks.
Yes, and it's quite unfortunate that the interview that was granted by the Commissioner of Police in the state was done in such circumstances where these types of videos were taken and released. I feel, the desire to show that the extraordinary measures, leading to this type of successes should never have overtaken the desire to take care of the victims, if at all they were victims. What they need immediately, more than anything, is medical attention, and then perhaps most of them would most likely be hungry. The commissioner did say that they've made arrangements, but I find it really shocking that they could subject them to such conditions when they've not really met their immediate needs, which is medical and most likely for food in that circumstance.
And Dr. Adamu, is there a better sense now of what's behind these kidnappings? Because some have suggested that there is a sort of criminal mafia behind it that involves politicians, businessmen, a lot of other people, and that the gangs are just the foot soldiers. I wonder what your assessment of that assertion is.
So each state has its different dynamics. In the case of Zamfara, the narratives have been changing, but it's a case of political involvement. There is a possibility that the motives are criminal, and then there is also the possibility that there is a desire to carve out locations, lands, and control those lands for economic exploitation. Remember, Zamfara has gold and other mineral resources, and whoever has control of those lands is able to exploit those mineral resources without any government interference, as it were. Licenses have been issued for mining, but most of those licenses have not been used, and so you've got this artisanal mining that is ongoing, and the control for that artisanal mining appears to be linked to the banditry that we're seeing. Now, beyond that is also the possibility that the porous border has allowed criminals from places like Niger to come in and exercise the types of banditry that we're seeing at the moment. So it's a combination of all of these factors that are going on in Zamfara specifically.
Well, those are very, very interesting lines of analysis there that you're pursuing. But the police and army have launched major operations against these criminal gangs that kidnap people. How is that going? Are they getting on top of it?
So the operations, as far as we know, are focused in probably just about 3-4 locations. The extraordinary measures that were imposed in Sokoto, Katsina, Zamfara, and Kaduna states, which has affected telecommunications in some local governments. At the last count, there were about 78 local governments across the 4 states that have been affected by this telecommunication shutdown. Of course, markets have been shut down in those local governments as well. And then in some places, they've imposed some form of travel ban at night, as well as other far-reaching measures. Now, the unfortunate part is, despite these measures, attacks are still ongoing. In the case of Zamfara, for example, attacks have been recorded in Maradun, in Shinkafi local government, where the police said they've rescued these persons. So the successes, I do not think, are in any way equivalent to the consequence of these far-reaching measures on the residents of this population. You can imagine a situation where telecommunication services are completely shut down, and then yet the attacks are still ongoing. Now, the most worrying component for me is the fact that the bandits
Dr. Kabiru Adamu, always appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. The Defense and Security Analyst, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, talking to me there.